Hey guys, Victor here again, coming at you with another retro deck profile for the September 2011 format. And today's focus is going to be on counter fairies, which is honestly a really underrated deck in this format because if you go first and you just basically set up a field with like Bountiful Artemis with 2 to 3 sets, it's really difficult for your opponent to actually straight up win the game because you're just going to be constantly negating, drawing, doing all things of that nature. So with that out of the way, let's just jump straight into the deck profile. So we're going to be kicking off the deck profile with the MVP of the deck being the Bountiful Artemis, which we play at 3. It's a no-brainer to play at 3 because it literally does so much for the deck's consistency, as every time you activate a counter trap, immediately after it resolves, you get to draw a card. So in addition to your counter traps, actually preventing your opponent from playing or resolving their effects, you get to draw one card. So that means you're basically just replacing your cards every single time with a free draw. And yeah, it's very possible for you to just quickly out-resource your opponent and just get the game spiraling out of control for them, just because this card is such a menace in this type of deck. But yeah, not much to say. The card is fantastic. You have to play 3. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Then after that, we're playing 3 Meltiel, Sage of the Sky. This card's pretty cool, and it's honestly like a little underrated. Not for its first effect, because its first effect is each time a counter trap is activated, you gain 1,000 life points. It's mainly for its second effect, which is if you have a face-up Sanctuary in the Sky on the field, you're able to destroy one card your opponent controls. And just having that like free negate in addition, or that free pop in addition to the negates that you're constantly causing with your counter traps, much like Bountiful Artemis, causes the game to quickly spiral out of control for your opponent as you're just continuously out-resourcing them. And then in addition to that, like I said, you're also gaining 1,000 life points every time you resolve a counter trap. And in this format, life points are still really important. So the more you have, it's not a bad thing. It's actually just really beneficial to you because it gives you more time to try and like outgrind or just out-resource your opponent. So yeah, 3 Meltiel, I think it's really underrated. And then something that we only play 2 of being 2 Zeradius, Herald of Heaven. So it's a good card, for what it does. You discard it and you search Sanctuary in the Sky. And then if you have a face-up Sanctuary in the Sky, you're able to normal summon this card, because if you don't have a Sanctuary, it just destroys itself. But if you do have a Sanctuary, it's a 2100 beat stick. But I didn't really want to like play 3 because this isn't really the main focus of the deck. Cards like Bountiful Artemis and Meltiel are instead. So even though it is like a solid card, I didn't really want to like, end up bricking on it, because there are times where you just open up like all 3 Zeradiuses, and sure, you can normal summon a 2100 beat stick, but at this stage in Yu-Gi-Oh, that's normally not enough to get you there, especially with an effect this, like mediocre. So yeah, just 2 Zeradius. Then after that, we're playing 2 Thunder King rai-oh. This card's a perfect fit for this type of deck because it's a light, it's a stun card. You'd be foolish not to include it in a deck like Counter Fairies. And then after that, we're playing some hand traps. So we have the 2 Max C along with the 2 Effect Veiler. Just, extremely standard stuff. After that, we're playing 1 Honest. So the majority of this deck is light-based, so you should obviously include Honest, especially because a lot of the monsters, such as like Bountiful Artemis and Meltiel, are 1600 attack, which is on the weaker side compared to a lot of cards like Reborn Tengu and things of that nature. So a card like Honest helping you keep them on the field is pretty much invaluable, because you do want to protect those cards as often as you can, as if they leave the field by like destruction, whether it's like battle or card effect, you're in for a rough time. Like, let's be honest. Like, those cards need to stick on the field if you want your strategy to actually be effective. And then for the final monster, we're playing 1 Vandalgion, the Dark Dragon Lord. This card's really cool, and it's really easy to summon because the only requirement to summon it is you just need to negate the activation of an opponent's spell, trap, or monster effect with a counter trap card, that you control. So by negating one of those cards with a counter trap, you can special summon this card from your hand, and then depending on what you negated, it gets one of the following 3 effects. If it's a spell, you burn your opponent for 1500 damage. If it's a trap, you target one card your opponent controls and destroy it. Then if it's a monster, you can target 1 monster in your graveyard and special summon it. So all of these effects are just like really solid, especially if you're able to negate a monster effect, because that means if you have like a Bountiful Artemis or an Honest or Thunder King rai-oh in your graveyard, you get to special summon the Vandalgion, then you get to bring those key cards back, and then you just continue the process all over, just outgrinding your opponent. So with that, that's the monster lineup, and now we can finally move on to the spell portion of the deck. So for the spells, it's pretty generic for the most part. It's like the spell lineup for most decks honestly doesn't change. So we're going to be playing 3 Pot of Duality. It's Duality. This is a really slow deck, so you need something like Duality to help boost the consistency and keep up with the top tier decks. And then you're also playing the 3 Sanctuary in the Sky. this card is honest. I don't know. It's really good, but it doesn't really do enough because it helps you activate some of your key counter traps that we will be showing off. And like I said, if you have like Meltiel on the field, it gives it an additional effect for to pop cards, which is always solid. And then in addition to that, while this card's face up on the field, any battle damage that you take that involves like a fairy monster becomes 0. So you're basically just protecting your precious life points the entire time. It's just as far as like counter or not counters, but as far as like field spells go, it's pretty mediocre because it only, you know, reduces damage to 0 if you have a fairy monster that battles. But it's still very much required because one of the counter chips that we play pretty much revolves around having this card face up on the field. And then after that, we just play some staples. So we play the 1 Monster Reborn, the 1 Dark Hole, the 1 Mystical Space Typhoon, and the 1 Heavy Storm. Now, you may be wondering, why do I play Heavy Storm in a deck that's called Counter Fairies, which obviously plays a bunch of counter traps? So, with a card like Heavy Storm in this deck, you can very easily catch your opponent off guard because if they see that you're playing counter fairies, they're going to be more inclined to set more cards carelessly, such as like, you know, just because they're like, what are the chances of this guy actually resolving anything? You want to be able to fight your traps with their traps, you know, things of that nature. So you can very easily catch them off guard, and then thanks to your counter traps, you're going to be able to stop their outs to something like Heavy Storm that they might or may not have, such as like Starlight Road or their own Solemn Judgment. You can very easily stop those with your cards. And then if you have like a Bountiful Artemis on the field, you're basically just winning at that point because you get rid of a lot of key cards that your opponent has, all the while you're replenishing your own resources. So yeah, I really like Heavy Storm in this deck just because of the like surprise factor, and yeah, not much else to it. And with that, that's the spell lineup, and now we can finally move on to the trap portion of the deck. Now, for the trap portion of this deck, we're going to be playing 3 Divine Punishment. Now, this card is actually one of the newer cards that was released during this time because its first printing was during the Ancient Structure deck. And what it does is, when a spell, trap, or monster effect is activated while you control the Sanctuary in the sky, you can negate the activation, and if you do, destroy it. So, this is pretty much the only counter trap that we play that actually requires the Sanctuary in the sky to be on the field. But like, you know, in return for having that card on the field, you literally have a negate to whatever you want. So this card is just fantastic when you get it rolling, and then you pair it with like cards like Bountiful Artemis. So it's basically like negate anything, draw 1. You know, just yeah. For the like the moment this card was released, it's pretty much like an instance 3 of 4 counter fairy decks in this era. So yeah, 3 Divine Punishment, gotta play it. Then something that I really like is 3 Drastic Drop Off. So this card, basically, when your opponent adds a card from their deck to their hand, including drawing, they have to discard one of those cards. So if they draw for turn, you just drastic drop off, make them discard that card, then your Bountiful Artemis or whatever you may have on the field draws you another card. And yeah, you know, just having like just kind of some kind of like hand control or things of that nature is honestly really huge in Yu-Gi-Oh! Because even if you, like, for example, a duel just started, if you drastic drop off and you hit something key, like say you hit a Reborn Tengu, that can just completely change the way that you approach like the way that they play their cards, right? Because you'll know what deck they're using, so you're gonna have like a better idea what you should and shouldn't stop. So just like the knowledge that you gain off of drastic drop off, in addition to, you know, like you actually going +0 because if you have the Bountiful Artemis or drawing a card and things of that nature, just makes this card really invaluable to the deck. Then we're gonna be playing 2 Dark Bribe. Negate a spell or trap, make your opponent draw 1, then you draw 1 if you have Bountiful Artemis, or if you have like Meltiel, you pop, whatever. Just a solid negate to help you protect your back row because you are playing like a decent amount of back row compared to other decks. Then we're also playing 2 Solemn Warning. Solemn Warning is fantastic in this deck. You know, pay 2,000 life points. It's a counter trap. You negate a summon or an effect that summons a monster. And in addition to that, we're also going to be playing Forced Back, which is basically like a pseudo Solemn Warning because when your opponent normal or flip summons a monster, you just negate the summon and then you return that card to their hand. It's not the greatest, which is why I'm only playing 1, but it's still like a nice, funny tech option that you can try out to, you know, just stop your opponent from playing as well as like gaining back your resources. And then the last Solemn card being Solemn Judgment because it's Solemn Judgment. It's a no-brainer. And that's it for the counter traps. It might be a little bit too low, and you can definitely try some other things such as like Magic Jammer, Curse Seal, the Forbidden Spell, Negate Attack, which, you know, are fine. I'm not really a big fan of those because they don't really accomplish all too much, and I feel like this is good enough for what you need. And then for the other traps, we just played the 1 Torrential Tribute and the 1 Starlight Road. You have a lot of monsters that want to be on the field at the same time, as well as a lot of spells and traps on the field. So being able to have key protection from cards like Dark Hole, Heavy Storm, Black Rose Dragon, you know, things of that nature is just insane. And with that, that's the trap lineup, which means we're done with the main deck, which is 40 cards as always, and now we can finally move on to the extra deck portion. Now when it comes to the extra deck, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It literally does not matter what you play because we're hardly ever going to go into it, but you should pretty much just fill it up with like good generic cards like always. So Brio, Trish, Utopia, you know, things of that nature. The only card that's actually required is Stardust Dragon, just because, you know, we play the Starlight Road, so you'd be kind of, yeah, you wouldn't be bright if you didn't include Stardust to summon off your Starlight Road. But outside of that, just fill it up with whatever you want, as long as it's like good. Like I said, you have the Brio, Trish, Utopia, and then tons of other cards, such as like Chimeritic Fortress Dragon, another Stardust Dragon if you want to play more than one Starlight Road. The extra deck is just extremely customizable to fit whatever needs you may have. And with that, that's the deck profile. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys next time. See ya!